Hey, welcome to the Industry Backstage Podcast. My name is Lee Evans. This is Genevieve Carrier, and we've got Edwin from Ribbon Property with us, and this is our first live show. So hopefully you can jump on board, you can ask us some questions, and we'll do our very, very best to make sure that you get all your answers. How you going, Edwin?
Look, I'm doing well, but I'm just still getting used to the traffic again now that everybody's on the roads. It's mayhem out there.
Yeah, it is a bit of a killer. I mean, we're suddenly back to school drop-offs and things, and yeah, it's a lot trickier than it used to be.
Where have you been today? You've been in and around the great city? The
northern suburbs, the west. Then had to do a pit stop by Silverwater. Just driving around. It's just getting longer. You got to make more time.
Yeah.
You've been busy on Twitter this week. There's a bit going on. It's all happening.
Yeah, it's all happening. I think a lot of it's centered around the hedonic. As you guys know, it's quite an interesting saga there. It's I just continue to debunk the predictive pricing and the way that they manufacture or concoct, should I say, the indexes. And how they're basically been controlling it and not letting the mainstream or the greater mass of people know what's really happening. But look, in reality, we're going to see greater changes in terms of falls of property. There's a lot happening with regards to how property is going to be valued in the future, and the pricing and the way that the hedonic works, as I said all along. Its best case scenario is that it's 60 to 72 days in arrears. So we're really only getting values of the falls from 2-3 months ago, of transactions from 2-3 months ago. It's going to be very, very interesting what happens moving forward now, because there's a lot of bad press around, unfortunately, with regard to the economy, but the hedonic's just not keeping up with it.
Not at all. That is a huge lag. And so we're talking about price discovery. So if you're looking to invest, as a disclaimer, none of this is all just conversation, chit chat. None of this is financial advice or health advice or anything like that.
No, and I didn't burn, and I'm not giving financial advice, and nor did I burn my financial planning license, but I do have a real estate license.
And you treasure it. It's where, yes, we need licenses. We need some regulation, even though it seems to be the way out of this mess is deregulation. But I think this is what got us into this mess. But anyway, so it's all about price discovery. So we had the RBA through a Freedom of Information request, where we discover that one of the governors or one of the economists is saying, "Oh, geez, I think we should turn off we should just turn off the property market, because geez, we wouldn't want anyone to think that there was a property bubble bursting here." That's interesting. Then we have this sort of, it does feel a bit conspiratorial, because they go to CoreLogic for their data. CoreLogic seems to be the only sort of game in town. There are other sources of data. And I know Martin North of Digital Finance Analytics has looked at some alternative data sources, and they do not correlate. So where is price discovery? We've just got to get out, as you are, and you've got to get out and attend auctions if you're interested in a particular area. Is that what you think? Is this, you've just got to go and do it yourself?
Well, that's it. You've got to do it. So, and that is the interesting thing, Jan and Lee, what I've been talking about, and that is we're getting upwards of 20, 30, 50 people attending auctions, and you might even have 4, 5, 6 parties registered to participate in the auction for one reason or another. But nobody's throwing in a bid. But the majority of the people are there. People that are looking into into those areas because they themselves, I believe, are looking at putting their properties on the market, and they're just gauging what the sentiment is. And quite frankly, the sentiment hasn't been for a while now what the mainstream media has painted it out to be. And when you see a large portion of families that would otherwise jump into an auction, an auction process there, or an auction campaign on the day, and start bidding at the bidding process at the agents' guide that they were quoting throughout the campaign, and then go upwards from there, was what was a common theme. But now what we're seeing is that a lot of these families are now holding the paddles close to the chest, and agents and auctioneers are absolutely flabbergasted, and they're also trying to sweating. They're hot under the collar because nobody's bidding. Nobody's starting to bid. My colleagues and I, we attended 4 auctions on the Saturday, last Saturday, in the northern suburbs of Sydney, and out of those 4 auctions, we only saw one Asian family participate in one auction. The rest, nobody. 2 auctions, no bids at all. Another auction, there was only one bid. And he got passed in at that bid, and then they were open for negotiations thereafter. And there was only one other auction at Willoughby that an Asian family participated. But guess what? It wasn't the Asian family that got the property, and they weren't going hard at it anyway. It was a couple of young builders that were just going to do a quick renovation on the property that got it. So it was an eye opener, to say the least.
Yeah. So
I was going to say, I think we got one of your tweets up here regarding that, Edwin, when you were talking about here saying, do we just witness history in the making, where once the Asian community brought anything with walls, I saw agents and auctioneers begging families to bid, and they didn't find much, didn't flinch to nor raise their paddles. So the crowd's up to 52 prompts and not one bid.
Not one bid. Yeah.
That was the Hidden Tiger, Silent Dragon tweet, was it?
I love that title.
I wish I could take. I wish I could say it was my heading. It wasn't. It was, but look, it was quite alarming. It's quite fascinating to see what is happening, and then you look at the CoreLogic predictive numbers. On the back end of these websites, where they work out obviously they've got some sort of say in working out the daily index figures as well. And when you look at these particular predictive numbers that they're putting out on the back end, and these are numbers, let me say this, guys, that these are numbers that prices that real estate agents, a large number of real estate agents rely heavily on, as well as the general public that have got paid access to CoreLogic, and they're 10, 15, 20% apart, and in some cases they're even 30, 40% apart with regards to what the predictive analysis would say that the property's worth to what it actually gets passed in at an auction, or the agents are quoting, or the property sells for, which is, again, it's a travesty, it's a fallacy what they've been putting out, and they need to be called out on it. And I'm prepared to call them out day in, day out until they change their ways, and until the mainstream stop relying so much on the hedonic. I mean, I know I've been tweeting out "Make the hedonic great again," but as you know, that's only a sarcastic comment.
I'm getting a cat. I get a cat, and sorry, I was just going to say we had a message from Leah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So we've pulled it up before.
I missed that before.
So Leah was saying some people still think prices will come back. Incredible. And now with new corona cases. So how do you think that the obviously the ongoing or the resurgence, even if you consider it from the Victorian point of view, corona pandemic will continue to flatten things, or what's your view on that, Edwin?
Well, I think if the way that Victoria is going, and if they go into a second lockdown, if they go into a city lockdown, or which could well happen, we don't know just yet, or they may just lock down certain parts of Melbourne. It's going to have huge ramifications. I mean, as I said in Martin's show when I was chatting with Martin last week, and that was that they're probably being the worst impacted so far with regards to investors and how values in properties, particularly apartments, as well as student accommodation and rentals in general, they're being hit the most. And if they go into a type second lockdown, that's going to have a huge impact because it's going to have repercussions all over the East Coast, because let's not forget that a lot of local investors, I'm not talking about overseas investors now, I'm talking about local investors, invested heavily in Melbourne and invested heavily in Queensland as well. And they invested heavily in Melbourne and Queensland through self-managed super funds, and quite a number of spruikers and marketing companies, as well as mortgage companies that basically conned, and I say again, conned people into buying investment properties through their self-managed super fund vehicles that they coerced into putting together to buy off-the-plan apartments in Brisbane and in Melbourne, because Sydney was just too hot, too high for people to come in with deposits of $40,000-$50,000. And I know people in the public servants that had 120,000 in the super funds, and they got conned into setting up a self-managed super fund vehicle. And not only did the brokers get them into one off-the-plan property, but they got them into two off-the-plan properties, apartments. They split that 120 into two deposits across two properties, and now they're in a world of poo-poo. You can imagine.
That's eggs in baskets. That's two eggs in one basket. That's it. You just, I find that incredible.
That's and two eggs and a chicken.
Two eggs and the chicken in one basket. And so you've got, and then the banks back all of this, of course, because they, create new money when they make loans. So we've got some very, very exposed households. We've really, and so it's not just, so it's people from Sydney who are investing in Melbourne. It's probably a lot of apartments. And you've also got people from Brisbane, or say you're saying Melbourne and Victoria, Melbourne proper, is basically exposed the eastern seaboard, and let's face it, that's where the majority of people are and the majority of mortgages will be held. I think that this could be this could be a trigger. This could set the dominoes a falling.
Well, I think the way I look at it is I look at Melbourne as the black hole, and it's going to be the black hole that's going to pull in all the other, all the other, pulling Sydney predominantly. And it's, look, the ripple effect is just unknown. But it's not only going to be with regard to residential investment. There's also a lot of commercial and a lot of business investment down there. As I said, people generally turn to Melbourne and then otherwise turn to Queensland or Perth, because they pick Sydney. Then when Sydney becomes unaffordable, they go to Melbourne. When Melbourne becomes unaffordable, they go to Adelaide or Queensland, and when they become unaffordable or saturated, then they often turn to WA. And Perth has been in the world of poo for decades now. So it's just natural, and that's just an observation of the local investors, let alone the overseas investors.
Yeah, I was also, so in WA sort of sat, because they have had mortgage stress, they've had people in negative equity for some time now, and as you say, what is it? Is it been a decade? Is it sort of, or more? I can't remember the dates, but
about 13. I think there been a lot of strife for the last 13 years.
They had their bubble linked to the resources mining bubble, and places like Mandurah that Martin and Robbie Barwick and also went over there, and John Adams and that went over there, and they've not recovered, and they are still down. But it hasn't brought down the banking system. It hasn't affected the whole country. It's just been this isolated island of property disaster over there. and it's never fixed, it's never righted. I think they've had they've practiced on a lot of programs to try and get new home buyers. Am I right in thinking, so the first home buyers are the base of the property market? Is this a very critical thing if you lose first home buyers, then the whole thing sort of crumbles away? Is that, I remember seeing that on a doco about Ireland that I've been looking into.
You look at well, they do play a big role, but also construction in the construction industry in general, and the sprawling market further out to the fringes. That are the ones that are creating the jobs. As I say, again, I said on Martin's podcast, and that is that there are more people employed in the subdivisions in the greenfield areas, in the subdivisions out west, southwest, northwest, than there are in the high-rise construction sector, because it's it takes a lot more to build and put these subdivisions together. There's a lot more manpower in that. So when you're taking away and generally that's when the first home buyers that want to get into the market, and the incentives, the government incentives for the local for a first home buyer are generally more attractive, because the grants are typically, they double. The government generally doubles the grants that are given to first home buyers that are buying new, up to a certain amount, up to a certain price. So in order to own a home, in order to own a piece of land, well, you got to go into the subdivisions, or if you want to live closer to the hubs, to the transport and commercial hubs, well, you end up with townhouses, and if they are unaffordable, then you're obviously buying apartments, and you're buying off the plan apartments. But after these pandemics, and after these issues with the pandemics and the ongoing issues that I believe we're going to have for many years to come, hence the reason why I'm drinking turmeric day and night, to keep those bugs away, and just to keep myself healthy. It's people's lifestyle, as I said, people's lifestyles are going to change. I feel that they're going to be moving further away from these centralized commercial hubs, and a lot of these commercial hubs with high-rise developments, they don't cater for that social distancing aspect of it. These apartments, these shoebox apartments, aren't built for that. The lifts aren't built for that. The stairwells aren't built for that. The strata companies don't look after them properly. The owners' corporations, most of the owners that are part of the owners' corporations in these buildings, in these apartment blocks, aren't even in Australia anyway, so they don't know what's going on. They think they've still got a pristine, new shiny apartment in Bankstown or Campbelltown or Parramatta or even the inner west or wherever they were built, wherever they got conned into buying, and they think their apartments are nice and shiny. Little do they know that there are $1 million ghettos, what we've got in Mascot, Woolite Creek, Hurstville, Chatswood, and the like. So, but the people that live here that are local, I think there's going to be a lot of migration further out to these areas where they've decentralized. The shopping centres are on single levels. There's a little bit more space. There's a little bit more recreational areas for their children to basically walk around and be able to adhere more to social distancing, because I think this is a revolution, that's a social revolution that's changed the way that we're going to be living and operating in the future. So don't be surprised if towns like Goulburn, Woy Woy, or further north or south, or even Lithgow, if they don't start picking up momentum, because people want a little bit of space. And you know what? With the speed of the internet and the fact that people are now finding out. We found out the hard way, to an extent, that we can work, and most people, not most, but a lot of people can work from home. Guess what we're choosing to do? Work from home.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Now, just looking on the feed there, Leah's put up an interesting tweet here. I bought my unit in the 80s for 50 grand and I was earning 50 grand. That unit now is about 900,000 and I'm only earning 100,000. So you're going from a 1-to-1 to a 1-to-9 ratio there. That's pretty significant. And that's from the 80s to now.
Yeah, I think the average. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not up to date with it, but last time the average income is $65,000. And the median but when you look at the median price for Sydney, we're about 13 times apart or something like that. It's some enormous amount of difference, and likewise, and that's why people when they want to invest in property, they generally start choosing the other states and the other cities because it was cheaper. But then those prices get inflated, and then they get bought out, and then we end up with what we've got now, which is what I've been saying for many years. We've got an oversupply, folks. It's only going to take a few thousand to come on the market, a few more thousand properties to come on the market in Sydney, and a few more thousand properties to come on the market in Melbourne, and we're going to go. The selling side of the real estate industry is going to be comatose well and truly, because historically we haven't had these low numbers since February this year. They've been extremely low, and the pool of buyers is only decreasing, as far as I'm concerned, on a weekly basis.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. And the other interesting thing you just mentioned before was the regional areas. And we just had a comment here from Elliot. Now, we generally know Elliot. He's one of our neighbours. So, g'day, Elliot. How you going? Says a cursory glance at real estate listings in Dubbo, Maitland, etc., show that it's easy to get a place for $350,000 if you're willing to leave the big cities. Now, that's the thing. Are you willing to leave the big cities? And that ties into what you were just saying, Edwin, about being able to work remotely and that revolution that's occurring now, ever so slowly, but it is happening.
Yeah, look, if you have a choice of buying a property in Campbelltown, you're buying a two-bedroom apartment. Some of the prices that I saw in Campbelltown last year, where you're buying two-bedroom apartments off the plan and also newly built for $520,000, or you have a choice of buying a four-bedroom house with a one-bedroom bigger than a granny flat, second dwelling on an 700 square meter block of land in Goulburn. You tell me, what would you choose, given the fact that Goulburn and Campbelltown are only now with the road, with the infrastructure that we've got there, is only a stone's throw away.
Yeah,
I tell you what I'd be choosing, particularly given the fact that areas like Goulburn and other areas, regional areas, there the vacancy rate is very low, and there's a lot of infrastructure being put into these regional areas. And let's look. You only have to look at what the government is also doing in a lot of these areas in order to provide jobs. The mandate is to create jobs. The mandate is to create infrastructure in order to get ourselves out of the hole that this economy is in. So we either create industry, which is, as you and I have talked about many times, Lee, how hard it is to set up a small business, particularly a manufacturing business, let alone in the food industry, with all the regulations and all the red tape and everything that has to go into it, let alone any other industry that has to do with anything to do with medical, food, or beverages, or even growing vegetables or fruit. It's so painful to go through all those regulations, and so if people aren't going to start these type of businesses, well, then a lot more infrastructure has to be placed, and that's where the governments, I feel, state and federal governments are going to be focused on, and they should be focused on, given the fact that they can borrow money relatively cheaply now, and they can start pumping it into those small regional cities that have been crying for many decades for growth, and they've got potential to growth, great potential for growth.
Well, they were in Goulburn. There is a meat process, was an abattoir.
Yeah, there's a couple of big abattoir down there, but I don't even know if they're still operating.
I'm not sure either, but I mean, it's sort of an opportunity to invest. There's some talk about it. Maybe you want to call them lefties or whatever, but my goodness, we have to do something for this country. We can't. And I mean, gas is not a solution. This is just ridiculous. But land still is going to be expensive in Sydney and that sort of things, but you could get cheaper land, because when you need to build a factory, they're big, right? And you need access to gas for a boiler, water, all that sort of stuff. And you need big chunks of land. You need it cheaply because you're going to have to spend a whole lot of money on your equipment. So this is your capital expenditure. We need the banks to lend to businesses, and and then there's Robbie Barwick's CEC's sort of thing about a national bank, and I think that's really, really important. So if anyone wants to go over there, and there's various submissions going all the time, but I really think a national bank is something really, really worthwhile that will lend to something other than property, because I mean this sort of thing is now so top heavy, it is starting to sort of implode, and that's what I've been looking at.
It's unraveling fast, and it's going to unravel a lot faster, as I've been saying, because of I think there was the mainstream media have been running some shows today in the news. I haven't had time to sit down and watch anything or catch up with the mainstream news because I've been driving around in traffic. And that is, but what I've been receiving, the tweets and the private messaging that I've been getting, in the evening has been the mainstream media have been playing, have had a lot to say about the apartment market tumbling, and it's going to tumble hard. I mean, it's not rocket science. How many years have I been saying that we've got a huge oversupply of newly constructed, predominantly apartments? Martin and I have discussed it for the last 2 years that there's close to 1 million properties. Sorry?
People do this. Everyone's good. Yeah. Sorry.
Now, it's interesting too. We're just looking at the comments there. Leah's mentioned that people in New York are moving to outer areas because of Corona, and we're sort of ties in what we were just talking about with the expansion of being able to work from home. People potentially moving out to places, as Elliot said, like Dubbo or Maitland or Newcastle, places like that, having the infrastructure to get people in and out and have the services like broadband and all that sort of stuff. And that's a whole other hour and a half talking about what happened to the NBN. It's interesting to sort of see that becoming more prominent with people's decision making. So now we're not just talking about where we work, do we have the services, but now we've got to consider health and well-being, such as, is the coronavirus here? I was just talking to a friend of ours, Philip, and he was saying they've got a little bubble down in Cootamundra, which is COVID-free, and that's how they're trying to keep it down there to make sure they don't have any issues. So I can see that becoming more and more of a decision-making tool for people. Is it an issue? Now, from just basic principle of, are we going to go to Melbourne for the school holidays? No. So this is going to now bleed into decision-making for buying property and making investments and things like that, I think.
Yeah, and there isn't a cure.
No.
Vaccine, just don't factor that in. It's just, it's
especially with the way that these things has been evolving, and now we've got some super duper strand in mainly in North America, and how's that going to affect us moving forward? But going back to set up businesses, which is something that we've been talking about a lot of the podcast, and that is and also Jen, you brought up the fact what's required to set up a manufacturing plant, to set up all this, and not only going through the compliances and looking at the land and the cost to set these things up properly, but guess what? We're still relying on bringing some of this machinery in from China.
Absolutely,
and China's coming to a standstill as far as I can I've been privy to, with regards to a lot of the manufacturing, a lot of the what's happening over there with the second wave that's hitting Beijing and for sure a lot of other cities. So this thing isn't over. This whole thing is going to play out. And going back to health, look, that's something that I've even before COVID, I started focusing on my health. From a lot more closely, paying more close attention to it, for my own personal reasons, because of different things that I've experienced over in my lifetime, and more so now because health is what we've been calling is the currency of the future.
Absolutely.
Do with all these, all the 5 investment properties, 10 investment properties, 50 investment properties. If you're gonna catch some sort of strange virus and then just kill over and die.
Yeah,
I know that's why I started getting really angry about when this kicked off. It's just like, oh my goodness, here I'm trying to, buy gold for the kids' future and everything and set this up, and the buggers had just released this.
But there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong with looking at that. I think that we just got to come back to earth, and all of society's got to come back to earth. The whole government's got to come back to earth and look at what we stood for many decades. What we stood for many decades. The great Australian dream. Being able to play, being able to be in a in a good sized block of land and a good size in a good home where you could play cricket in your backyard. These days you can't even bloody well play ping pong. You can't even play dark and you kill yourself. All that sort of shit. So it's interesting. We're going to be changing. There's going to be a lot of changes, and I think there's going to be a lot of great, good changes. And if we sit down and spend a little bit more time with their families and which a lot of people have been doing because of the lockdown, and they've realised that, hold on a minute, monopoly isn't so bad after all, as opposed to just being isolated in our rooms and playing on the TVs in each room, or the plasmas. I don't know what they're called now. I used to call them TVs. People don't know what they call them now, plasmas, I guess. But we're finding all these things going back to using our minds, and myself, I'm enjoying working on working on the physical well-being. Has enabled me to center myself again, center my mind, and center my as I said before in a previous podcast, and that is being able to have a sleep, and being able to know that because I could remember 1, 2, or 3 dreams throughout the night, I realized that I've had a good deep sleep, and something that I've missed for quite a number of years, because of the stresses of driving, because of the stresses of financial pressures, because of mortgages or this or that or the other. So it's life's going to change.
Yeah, I was just look, we have been switched on to coronavirus very, very early on because we were watching Peak Prosperity. You'll find them on YouTube. It's Dr. Chris Martinson, and he's done a whole lot of stuff from the economics and the macro and that sort of thing. But he's a medical, got a PhD in pathology, and he was pulling apart what was going on and that sort of thing. And then also from another sort of information via Twitter. Misty One, I don't know who that is, but I think it's a she, has put out some really interesting tweets. And there's this, there's a community on Twitter, and they are some very, very smart scientists, and they are calling out, because there's been so many eyes. Everyone's been off work for all these months. All these amazing scientists have had to shelve their studies, shelve their projects, and that sort of thing. And all these eyes are just being focused on this one virus. And oh my God, it's being really delved into, and they are really calling out what's going on. And this is wrong, and this is right. When people are so adamant that this came out of that Wuhan market, it's absolutely. Well, that is wrong to say. They cannot be that adamant. Yeah. And most likely it did come from, I'm probably getting out of the laboratory due to gain of function research. And if you really would like to know why I'm so confident in saying that, please go and look at JC on a Bike. He is another neuroscientist.
No, he's a biologist in Pittsburgh.
A biologist working at the university and the hospital in Pittsburgh in the United States, and he goes through the many, many papers. You actually go with him on a journey on his GoPro as he rides to and from work, but then he'll do these things. But the virus, right? It's only, you can't use antibiotics to treat a virus. it happens with all viruses. That's never going to work. There's no pill you cannot take. There's no quick fix. It is up to our own bodies and immune system to fight it off. So whatever you do to improve your immune system, sleep, food, some very sort of really sort of basic things. And I guess you'll notice it. You've seen it throughout your life. When you've had really stressed times, that's when you go down. Other times you're able to withstand and keep going through a cold or a bad cold or something like that. But when you're mentally at a low, this is when your biological guard is down. And so things like antioxidants, zinc, all of these sorts of things which go into just supporting your immune system is going to help you fight this. So the COVID is all about how much you're exposed to initially. So that's your inoculum. You want to keep that low. So that's why we want to wear masks. Only now. As everybody's saying, oh, geez, I think it's better if we wear masks. Oh, my goodness me. After, saying they're terrible, I even saw the deputy medical officer saying, oh, no, we still think it's not good for most people to wear masks. It's like, oh, for goodness sakes, can you just...
Oh, look, society itself, look, is fatigued. The economy is fatigued. Society's fatigued. We've all been fatigued, and I think we've been fatigued for over a decade. And it's going to give. It's going to give. Nature itself is also I liken it to be associated to be fatigued, and frustrated with the way that we've treated this this planet, the way we've treated our environment, and the way that we're treating people, and the way that politicians have been treating the general public. I mean, everything is just fatigue, and it's got to give. So it's giving, and it's going to. We just got to find that balance, and we just got to find that center. Regardless of whether you're left, right, north, or south, or whatever belief. Whether you believe in masks, whether you don't believe in masks, I think first and foremost, I think unless you're of a sound mind, unless this is from my own personal experience, emotionally, if you're fatigued, like you said, Jen, it's going to be very hard to overcome anything. It's very hard to overcome a common cold. Because of the stress and the fatigue. So if we take that approach to life in general, start looking and researching with everything that's at our fingertips, and looking at experts, looking at there are a lot of experts here, like as we've talked about it, like Martin, yourselves in the food industry, with regard to the science behind the food industry and the technology behind the food industry, and what works, what doesn't work, what's of value. Like here I am trying to keep a healthy, balanced diet, popping pills the size of bloody golf balls thinking that I'm gonna. My body's going to absorb all the vitamins that they tell me it's got. You guys to blow my bubble on that one and tell me most of it's just going down the sewer. But finding those, there are a lot of experts that you just need to. I think people need to reach out a little bit more and research. As I always say, even with property, you just got to research and reach out. Don't be scared.
It does take effort. I think everyone wants a free ride and whatever, and it's like, nah, that's not how life works. And just to go back, I forgot what I was mentioning. JC on a bike, one of his colleagues at I think in the same faculty over in Pittsburgh in the hospital, was doing a study on the actual links between the adrenal gland and the brain. I'm out of my depth here, but basically to say that things like mindfulness, things like yoga, and I'm not a yoga person, but they are real. They are at the point where they can check that there are electronic signals that are coming from the adrenal glands. Think adrenaline. So this is the thing that's fight or flight.
Yeah.
And this is the chemistry they are figuring out, and they can prove by using the rabies virus, all things. That was how that they tracked how this how these signals went up the spinal cord to the brain. And it's like, and I mean, you know, people have anecdotally said, yes, look at the yogis in India and the various gurus and that sort of thing. But humans have used meditation, and you've always had your holy people within societies who are more connected. It's about mind-body connection.
Yeah.
It's true. They're proving it.
I was going to say also in that study, they looked at the effect of stress, which produces cortisol in the brain, which is the stress hormone. That a doctor described it to me as it's basically corrosive for the brain. It rusts your brain out. So if you live under high stress constantly, you're going to eventually erode some of the neural pathways of your brain. But then if you go through the mindfulness or the meditative processes, and that could be, I mean, I'm not one for sitting down and listening to a meditation, but I will play my guitar for a long period of time and just, that's the other part of your brain going. And that's where your serotonin and your dopamine come in to counteract that cortisol. So having a good diet full of things like, you know, your basic veggies and your fruit and your grains and your nuts and all that sort of stuff, they all have elements that actually promote serotonin and dopamine to counter the cortisol. So we have in nature already inbuilt solutions to some of these problems. But this particular study Jen referred to was an amazing thing, because it's the first time we've been able to link that effect of, okay, this is a external physical effect coming into me, which is then sending a signal to my adrenal gland, which produces that adrenaline and gives you that cortisol fight or flight effect, which if you live under that for a long period of time, it really does wear you down. And that's where I guess you come back to your concept of fatigue. If we're all running under stress all the time, if our body is fighting the fight or flight response constantly, you're going to get fatigued. And this is where you need that sleep. You need that bit of exercise. And I've got to say, from my own personal experience, just a bit of exercise does wonders. And that is a physical thing. It actually reduces the amount of cortisol, increases the amount of serotonin and dopamine, and does your body a great deal of good. So I can't recommend highly enough just a 20-minute walk, just a little bit of exercise to help counter some of those modern day stresses.
Yeah,
so how do you do that? How do you do that when you're living in a high-rise apartment, and how do you do that when you're living in areas where it's overly populated and basically bad management of high-rise developments turn into ghettos? And this is what families are going to start. People are going to start making these changes, as we've been discussing. So what we've just discussed then has a huge effect on property. And how people are going to approach property, because keeping in mind that, as I said also previously in other podcasts, and that is we've got COVID-19 now, but what are we going to have in 2021? Are we going to have COVID-21? Are we going to have COVID 50? Are we going to have COVID 100? Well, where does it stop? And these are the changes that people are going to make, that are going to have geographical impacts. They're going to, the demographics is going to change. Which is rather interesting. Just on that point that you raised, Lee, with regards to you go and play your guitar, and Jen goes for a walk around the block, or meditate and that. I go under houses and look to see whether or not there's termites or or wood rot.
Yeah.
Or I attend auctions and annoy auctioneers. And that's my meditation.
It gives you great pleasure. Yeah. I would imagine. Yeah, no, but I was going to say, look, I consume a lot via podcasts and listening, and I used to go on walks and be plugged in and listen to Joe Walker and think about property bubbles and the technical side of it. But I must say, and just trying to walk the kids to school, take the long way, and I don't plug in, I'm unplugged, and I'm there. I can notice the birds, I can notice the gardens, you need some off time. And I was just going to say, so but in China, when you see a lot of people living in high density, and that's when you see all the old the Chinese out there doing their Tai Chi, and will do it anywhere. So you adapt to that sort of high-rise living, and you've got to have those spaces around you. But if you are going to live in that environment, I don't know how people do it with kids, but but yeah, you've got to make extra effort, because maybe you don't have a garden to go and potter in, or a pond or something to take your mind off stuff.
Yeah.
You have to consciously leave the building, go to the park, or do whatever. And shops, that's too busy. So yeah, somewhere. Oh, it's Lee.
Sorry, Lee. I did say Lee, and Jen said, no, it's probably Lee because it's got an A on the end. So
sorry,
yes, apologise for that. And
sorry,
I get it all
Lee.
the time. The amount of Miss Lee Evans mail I've got over my life is unbelievable. So
sorry about that. So, and also Lee there has mentioned some other people there.
So yeah, there was one there. Joe Dispenza has written a book on this topic, and what I just wanted to bring up, what Lee brought up, was an issue about melatonin. And we'd had discussions about this, Edwin, with regards to sleep. Now, I'll put my hand up. I was an owl for most of my life. I would quite happily go to bed at 3 and get up at 7. So I wasn't sleeping very well at all. And whilst I was in my 20s and, I was lively and lots of energy, that was fine. The 30s, you kind of notice it and you're sort of still doing those sort of things. And then you finally get to your 40s and you're sort of going, hang on, this is not really doing me any good. And I found that was really critical. So once I went back to a more a complete sleeping pattern and had some decent sleep, then it's basically a way of allowing your body to reestablish some of its metabolic pathways, get some of those hormones in, like the melatonin, from your fish, from your eggs, from your plant sources, and allow your body its best chance to actually utilize it. And I guess when you mention you're getting things like dreams, and this is like when people talk to me about the sort of experience they've had from taking various products, there's obviously our products with the turmeric, and there's some mineral products that we make and other things. The physical effects that people notice, and this is the really thing, if you've got mindfulness, you know what's happening in your body and you can see those effects and you go, okay, that was a positive thing. You can then build on that. And I guess this is where we talked about having that whole approach to health and well-being. And in today's environment, and I guess this goes back to something else Lee said, which is you're nothing without your health. Jen and I have taken the approach that the system is not always going to be there to save you, or if it is there, it may be broken or it might be overstressed, like with the COVID issue. We've seen what's happened in New York, we've seen what's happened in London, we've seen what's happening in Russia, and Brazil is just a nightmare at the moment. The amount of stress being put on the health system, if you do have something go wrong, if you do need something which is say not related to COVID, but you need a particular elective surgery or something, you're going to have a really tough time being able to access those services. So if you can look after yourself as much as possible, if you can have a diet, an exercise regime, a sleep regime that's going to give you the best chance to maintain health. And I've got to say, since I did that, the number of colds I've had, the number of aches and pains I've had, things like that, I've really noticed a reduction in. It's never a removal. I mean, I've played a lot of sport. I've had a great time in my youth, so I'm going to have some scars to show for that. But the benefit, and I'm just amazed at something so basic like, sleep and diet, and you just think, well, I'm a scientist, I know that. But then you start, it's like most things, mechanics have terrible cars, plumbers have leaky pipes. I had a terrible lifestyle for years. And now I've actually got a better lifestyle. I can see the benefit, I can see the health benefit, and just the clarity, the ability to think. It's just so important to the day-to-day.
Yeah, look, it does play a big role in your immune system. The immune system has got a lot of layers. It's pretty complex. They're still researching it, learning about it, and that sort of thing. But I think as a whole, and I was also going to say there's a lot of people who are taking things out of their diet, thinking that they're doing themselves well. I think, remove McDonald's. Good. I don't know about, there's a lot of, say, remove dairy or wheat or that kind of thing. Do have a think about that. Make sure that you are making up for the lost nutrition.
I'll give you a good example. When you're talking about removing grains, like my mother, she is gluten intolerant, so she's had to remove most grains and wheat products from her diet. The whole grain of wheat produces or supplies a lot of magnesium into your diet. So if you remove that, you're going to reduce your magnesium overall intake. So if you don't balance that by increasing your veggies or increasing whatever source it is, maybe you are going to supplement, you're going to end up being deficient. So you really got to be careful when you start messing around with your diet.
Yeah, it's just, a family member with memory issues and that sort of thing, and they were recommended to have this drink. And there was I was like, oh, okay, what's in it? DHA, EPA. So, okay, we can get that from eating oily fish and that sort of thing. There was a choline, which is a B. I think is a B.
B4.
B4.
Yeah.
And it was just like, okay, where are we going to get that? Oh, it's from eggs, dairy, and cruciferous vegetables, which are your broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, all of those sorts of things. And it's just if we eat eat well, mostly vegetables, bit of fruit, bit of meat, and some grains, like that's it. That's all we need. And we don't have to spend, it does take time to prepare food. And I was talking to someone recently, it's just like, I just don't, they're at work, trying to run a household, all that sort of stuff. And, it takes time to prepare food. There are some things. I remember talking to a young chef one time, and look, he cooks for a living. So he wasn't keen on going home and cooking. That's what he did for his job. But what he did do, he did go and buy bulk in the time, did all his prep. So all the pumpkins were peeled, the vegetables were washed, things will last longer in your fridge. And then when it comes to actually cooking for that meal, it's a lot quicker. So you can save 15 minutes or something. And that might be enough just to, not buy prepackaged stuff, not to reach for a ready meal, not to, because you really...
Well, that ties into what we spoke about in the last episode when we were talking about the plant-based burgers and people saying, these are really healthy. But there's all these hidden sodiums and hidden elements to it. Now, a lot of the vegetable gums, you see things like 415 and 412 and things like that. These are guar gums and xanthan gums and things like that. They basically pass through your system the same way a fibre would. They don't really affect you too much. And unless you've got a particular issue with, say, an animal-based gum, which is gelatin, versus, say, a microbial versus a plant, they're all pretty much going to be the same for you. But it's those other elements. It's the extra triglycerides. It's the extra artificial ingredients. It's the extra sodium that they put in there.
MSG, because that's sodium as well. So and things taste.
All these elements go into processed food to make them taste good. Plus, also, we have to consider things like preservatives. Now, we've both used preservatives in products over the years.
I have preservative in the cupboard.
Yeah, we do. And, I mean, it has its place. But if you're consuming, all of your products have a preservation, and then all of your products, say, have passed through a what we call a UHT process, an ultra high temperature treatment. So what we're talking about there is raising the temperature of the food up to above 121 degrees for 1 to 4 seconds and then instantly cooling it back down. Now, that kills all the microbes, takes out all the bugs, but it also really changes the protein. It changes the vitamins. It changes all sorts of things in there. You get a reduction in nutritional quality. So it's basically it's a fine balance between convenience and good health in these days at the moment. And I can't implore people enough to head towards the good health, because the convenience may actually end up costing you more.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up Lee's comment there. I also take liposomal vitamin C, extremely powerful. Am I taking too much? Well, look, I guess it's pretty
flexible. It just goes in one end out the other. So
again, I think it wouldn't be too much, but it's are you getting it from other sources?
Well, also you've got to consider, if you're paying, say, $60 for your unit, is 20 to 40% of that going straight through the bath? You go straight into the sewer. That's unfortunately what I have to talk about with a lot of people is, okay, I had a gentleman the other day saying to me he was taking magnesium supplements and he was taking a magnesium oxide. Now, the trick with taking an oxide, if you do any research, you'll find that an oxide only yields about 4% of its molecular weight of the element you want. So if you've got 100 milligrams of magnesium oxide, you only get 4 milligrams of magnesium out of it. But what it does do is it hits your tummy. It changes from magnesium oxide to chloride, from a chloride to a sodium bicarbonate.
I'm talking to you.
Yes, I know. And
Sorry.
And then I said basically that will be able for your body then to absorb that salt in your lower intestine. But that's all got to happen in the time your digestion takes. So it really depends on how quickly that's moving through your alimentary canal and all that sort of thing. So to have a good source of magnesium that's a naturally occurring source, and aware that if you are going to supplement to an appropriate amount, don't think more is better. The appropriate amount is better. And I usually say, 50 to 70% of your RDI, no more than that should come from supplementation, because the rest of it should really be coming from a balanced diet. If you don't get it from a balanced diet, you're not getting all the other little macronutrients and micronutrients, and your body needs that fiber and that protein, all those other bits and pieces. Yeah,
because we are used to consuming whole foods. That's what our body's set up to do. And in the product that we made, it's a complex food. It's not just a one-hit wonder. And so to get your many different things out of like a stalk of broccoli or whatever. There's more than just choline. There's more than just I don't know, vitamin. What else do we get out of?
Well, broccoli is a fantastic.
It's a one-stop shop. Our kids always have to eat the broccoli.
That's one thing I insist that my kids always eat, simply because that will ensure they get probably the greatest amount of macronutrients that's necessary, plus the fibre. It's just a useful ingredient to throw on the plate every time. Like something like a carrot, that's great. You're getting some beta carotene, turns into vitamin A in your body. Potatoes, getting some great starch. There's all these sort of things. Peas, you're getting iron, all this sort of stuff. But broccoli is such a useful vegetable for the overall. So if you're going to, reduce yourself down, pick up one thing, pick up some broccoli, have some little trees.
Just listening to what you guys have been saying there for lately. It's listening to all these magnificent food. Not only am I getting hungry, but I've been sitting here thinking about the way that these these apartments are being built, and some of the townhouses. The kitchens are so tiny. You couldn't keep more than bloody 2 kilos of potatoes at home, let alone broccoli and all these other vegetables and everything else. This is why I'm saying that trying to tie up the topics with the health and our lifestyle work and property. I just find it fascinating just listening to the diet and how we've been used to taking so many supplements, thinking that we're doing a great thing, but yet most of it's just going down the drain, and our bodies aren't really absorbing any of it. But then you look at the way or the floor plans of some of these apartments and some of these townhouses, these medium density and high density dwellings. There's no room in the kitchen. There's really no room for to keep sanity in that. That's what I'm saying. There's going to be a big shift in moving, and what's going to facilitate this is obviously two things. One is the high-speed internet, being able to work from home, and in offices or workplace environments, allowing people to work more from home, as well as government being proactive and putting up some serious infrastructure out in the northwest, southwest, and western suburbs, as opposed to bringing it all back into the city where it's all congested. I mean, of late we've just had 5,000 to 7,000 jobs move from Parramatta CBD back into Redfern. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, so much for decentralizing, so much for creating jobs. And where are these 7,000 people? They're traveling from the north. They're traveling from the northwest, southwest, and west. They're traveling out from all these smaller places, suburbs, to work into the city. I mean, they've really got to change. This whole landscape has got to change from all hierarchies at all levels. But there's going to be, fundamentally, there will be shifts, and people are going to start shifting. The demographics are going to change. It's just a watch and see, wait and see period. As I said, I've seen many. I've seen different changes in demographics in different suburbs. Certain ethnic groups move into certain areas, and properties go up, or they stay flat, or whatever. But we're going to get a lot more of that with regards to the population in general. Just starting to, I feel they're going to start vacating all these these densely populated areas to live in to get a bit more space. And some families are going to be going into a little bit more debt to be able to afford a townhouse rather than live in a 3-bedroom apartment. They'll live in a 3-bedroom townhouse a little bit further out, go through a bit more pain, but to put that investment into the family's well-being, mental well-being, and physical well-being.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was just going back to something you said before, and I know when we were talking months ago when you were advising us for a family situation, and there's the number of listings that is this finely balanced arrangement, and we're at 17,000. So this is the total number of listings in this Greater Sydney area, or is it?
In the Sydney region. The reason why I pick the domain numbers is because domain, the portal, it identifies Sydney a lot more clearly in terms of the regions. REA expanded out too far north, too far south, as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
But I've used domain because of the way they map out the Sydney region. And historically, we haven't had such low numbers, but at the same time, historically, we've also now got not only low numbers in terms of listings of properties for sale, but also in terms of the pool of buyers. And I think the pool of buyers are shrinking. Well, what we ended up with at the beginning of the year was we ended up with something like 13,175 was in the second week of February, the amount of listings that were listed on domain. And I said on Martin's show at that time, I said once we hit 17,000, the sentiment is going to change in the Sydney market, and they were achieving big sales, and there was a lot of propaganda about the mainstream media were putting out a lot of propaganda, and a lot of the narrative within that mainstream media was, oh, property prices are going up. And some pundits and some people from Spruikonomics were calling that there was going to be a rise in, potentially a double-digit rise in property prices this year as well because of what was happening. But yet nobody spoke about the fact that historically we haven't had 13,000, just over 13,000 for sale listings in the Sydney region, and so that heated the market up a bit. But then as people became more confident to put the properties back up on the market, the numbers rose, and when we got to 17, everything seemed to really plateau. And at the same time, we also started getting the issues with coronavirus and lockdown. What we've got now is 17,500, or we've been tracking around the 17,500 and above towards the end of the week, of each week. And what I've noticed is that although there are a few more properties being sold week in, week out now, but there's a few more properties come back on the market to keep those numbers at closer to the 18,000. And again, traditionally in winter we would get an attrition of for sale listings, but we don't have that. If anything, we've had a couple of hundred more listings week in, week out. And what I feel is going to happen come spring, because around spring we're also going to have the mortgage holiday is going to cease, and people are going to start having to pay the mortgages. But I feel that between now and spring, if we get a rise of anywhere between 3,000 to 5,000 new listings come on board in the Sydney region, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. Sydney's going to be in a lot of trouble because the pool of buyers is by no way means increasing. Search increase, the so-called search index that REA are putting out, that may be increasing, but that's only people searching to see how the value is dropping in properties. No different to the amount of people attending auctions that I've seen. I've seen groups of 20, 30, 40, 50, up to 50 people, but yet no bids. It's really the whole landscape.
Well, I was going to say, I saw a tweet from Tarek Brooker, the avid commentator, saying that the increase in search could have been him doing some research.
And I turned it back to him and I said, listen, stop tipping the scales, something along those lines.
I found this thing, little tipping the scale for your amusement.
Okay, so this is what we're talking about. We're talking about finely balanced. I can guarantee you nobody got hurt badly.
No old men were doing the filming of that, apparently.
Yeah, they didn't get hurt, but I tell you what, a lot of property investors are going to be hurting a lot over the next 6 months.
No soft landing.
No soft landing at all.
Okay, so we've just been clicked over the hour or so we might think about wrapping it up there. But I just wanted to bring up one little point that you guys have been talking about property, we've been talking about health. We haven't sort of spoken about the food industry as such. And one of the things Jen and I do is we look at the product recalls that come through. So I saw some juice the other day that had a mycotoxin contamination. There was some Kmart chocolate eggs that had some plastic contamination. But I think the corker that I've seen from the last month would be this one here, which is a company called Apollo Bay Distillery. Very kindly started making hand sanitizer, then accidentally put it into their gin bottle. So, unfortunately, the poor lady that picked up this bottle of SS Casino gin ended up having a very bad time with it, feeling sick, because not only did it have 70% alcohol, it had a little bit of glycerol, a little bit of hydrogen peroxide. And look, you can put all the tonic water you want with that. It's not going to taste great in the end. So be aware that, you know, we all make mistakes in the food industry, and
it's made by people.
Yeah, it's made by people, and, you know, recalls happen.
Do keep a lookout for recalls.
But the moral of that story was that lady actually tasted something different, something funny, and she drank it anyway. So,
yeah, well, the moral, and the other moral of the story is, you know, stop drinking gin and get onto the tequila.
No, I got to say I'm a dyed-in-the-wall gin drinker.
Look, and if anyone's watching this later, please pop us a note in comments if you'd like to go into the draw for my which way is it? The Peter Leeds competition, my leftover mugs. But so we got debt is not wealth, and I look at that and I think, yeah, for all those who haven't gone in over their heads, I think we're going to be in a better position than the many who have. And then hopium of the masses. So you can nominate your date on your cup, post it on Twitter or that sort of thing, somewhere in 2020 something. But it's inevitable, people.
Absolutely. Okay, so we might wrap it up there. So thanks a lot, Edwin, for joining us. Thanks, Jen, for being here.
Thanks, Lee, for running it.
Thank you. Thanks, guys, for putting the show together.
No worries. So this the recording of this episode will be up on YouTube probably later on this evening. So if you want to come back and have a look at anything again, I want to thank everyone that threw out some comments and some questions.
Ciao,
it's
Lee.
really been...
Ciao.
So yeah, this will be the first, hopefully, of many. Next time, have some questions ready. Tweet us up front. We'll do a bit of research and make sure we've got all the answers for you. But until we see you next time, thank you very much, and look forward to talking again. Bye.
And don't forget, make the hedonic great again.
Get a cap. Get a cap.
Yeah.
Ciao.